Okay, we are live. Happy Sunday afternoon, everyone. Are you there, Future Shock?
Happy Sunday. I am here. How was
Wow.
your?
Okay,
You say
second time
Happy
lucky,
Sunday.
better than last week, huh? Only took three times. It took three times last week. This time, second stream, and we
Trust
did
the
it this time.
process. We're progressing.
We're
That's
getting
progress.
there.
So yeah, is it really a happy Sunday though? Because backstage you were mentioning you're a bit worse for wear today.
I'm a bit rough today. I had a bit of I saw some friends yesterday, and yeah, the rum came out. Bottle of rum. I said, gosh, we got through like a bottle and a half between two of us, which is really cheeky, isn't it? So it
It's
wasn't
pretty cheeky.
intended to
It's
be that
decent.
way. I went quite innocently with 4 beers, just thinking, oh, it'll be a nice civilized one, because I meant to go to church this morning. That didn't happen. So
You know what's gonna as soon as you go in with that mindset, you know what's gonna happen. You know it's gonna.
cocktails, that's, and then the introduction of ginger beer, which is always a pleasure, and fresh lime juice. You're like, yes, this is like healthy. It's almost like you're telling yourself you're sort of doing some kind of health sort of detox, but obviously with the addition of rum. But I've been really healthy. I've been at the pool. I've been at the gym for the past 4 days. So I like.
Is this your first drip? So sorry to cut you. You were I think last week you were saying you'd gone. Well, you were a couple of weeks in, like no drinks, and then was this the first time since?
Yeah, well, I was going too far the other way. I was feeling too healthy. You should do everything in moderation, and I think that includes sort of physical fitness. You can have too much of a good thing, because I was actually overtraining. Have you ever done overtraining?
I probably overtrain all the time, but I'm just addicted to going. In fact, today is the only day I don't train. I've had to force myself to like have this one day. Otherwise, I would have just gone and done some cardio or something. But yeah, I think it's good. Obviously, as you get a bit older as well, like you're not in your 20s. Neither of us are in our 20s anymore. Do you know what I mean? So you do need to give your body that recovery period.
So I did like 100 lengths in the pool for the past 4 days. So I did 400 lengths. I think that was probably almost like a mile a day or something. And I just came home and I just couldn't sleep. I was like classic overtraining, where you just, your mind's just spinning and you just can't sleep. You just feel really tired, but it's like that Nirvana song, I'm so tired, I can't sleep. And it's like, this, I'm doing the right thing here. And my body is fucking me over for it. So I thought,
what time did you do it though?
What time did you blasted on Saturday night to sort of get the old serotonin and the old relaxation chemicals going on, rather than the frantic sort of gym chemicals. You know what I mean?
But what time did you train?
What do you mean? Just in the afternoon.
Okay, so it wasn't that. So it wasn't even that close to when you went to bed then that you trained.
No, it's just overtraining. Quite used to it actually, but it's so annoying. It's like, oh man, come on.
Yeah, I don't know about. I mean, I probably do technically overtrain. I mean, I have noticed if I have more rest, then I do tend to increase muscle mass better. Say if I took a couple of extra days, but I don't know. I've got it's just a weird addiction, isn't it? I kind of in the habit of going pretty much every day, and just to even, I've only just started designating either Sunday or Saturday, whichever, depends what I'm doing, but usually Sunday as a day off. I've only been doing that for like 3 weeks. Otherwise, I've been going every day. I've been doing either one way or the other. I'll be like not going and going out too much and, boozing too much and all this kind of stuff and not doing gym, or I'm just going to the gym every day.
So, yeah. So I'm basically I'm up north at the moment. So I'm taking this time. The thing is, with the gym, I've only got like a limited time. I've got like 11 more days and I'm going back down south. So it's like you don't want to take a rest day because you want to maximize and capitalize it. Because when in London, my exercise is running. So I go like running every day. But when I come up north, I get to the pool, go to the gym. So I sort of alternate it, So it's like taking a rest day. It means I did 4 days straight and I just didn't rest. And I woke up like crippled every morning, just feeling like my muscles really aching. And the only way I could like make any sense of the day was by going back to the gym and actually feeling a bit better. So it's kind of like a drug. I was addicted. I like needed the fix of going back to the gym. But yeah, day off today. You know, load of boozing last night, so hopefully that'll balance it out.
I mean, I think personally, I think overtraining is a lot more preferable to undertraining. I mean, you can calibrate your life if you're having trouble sleeping training. You can calibrate slightly differently and whatnot. You know, you can react to that. But undertraining is worse because you're just like continuously unhealthy. At least with overtraining, you've got like decent fitness throughout the overtraining. Do you know what I mean? If you're undertraining, you've got like zero fitness. Your fitness is way down. So it is,
Yeah.
you know, it's the better of the two. But yeah, I probably do. Do you know what? I've been doing so much cardio as well recently. I've just, like you say, waking up every day permanent, like, you know, feeling like done in. It's just my legs and my knees in particular, because I do a lot of bike stuff as well. Do a lot of bike in the Stairmaster, and it just like, it's savage on your knees, you know, especially when you're an old man like me.
Yeah, I was supposed to jump in there and say you're not that old, because if you're old, then it makes me even older. So I guess I have to sort of talk you down from that position of you feeling old. Because if you're old, I'm older. So no, you're not that old, bro. Don't worry about it.
In the
You're in your
grand
prime,
scheme of the, you know, the infinite universe, like neither of us have an age really. You know, we're just sort of infinite consciousnesses, like, you know, in this temporary sort of matter-based molecular sort of like floating experience through our quadrant of the galaxy on this little leafy spaceship that we're on at the moment.
Leafy spaceship. Yeah.
It's pretty leafy. In fact, I shouldn't really. It's probably more watery than leafy, to be fair.
We're all hurtling through space in like a dozen directions at once.
But it's interesting how, like, when you look at, I don't know, like
increasingly, exponentially increasing velocities and different axes as well, aren't we? It was like spinning and falling. You know, the Earth's moving around the sun, and then the sun is moving through the, you know, the galaxy, and then the galaxy is moving, and everything's moving and falling. Isn't it amazing?
Well, this is what, well, everything's tumbling. Like I always say, like it's all just tumbling and tumbling. But it's kind of like, and this is kind of like, I suppose, ties in with the hypersphere argument or theory that the tumbling is due to it being a kind of sphere that we're on, I suppose, the skin of, essentially, and that's sort of what creates gravitational pull. I don't know if that's exactly, I understood that correctly, or I mean,
well, you know, when you meditate, when I do Zen meditation, and there's times when you reach the peak of that experience in Zen meditation, which is something everyone should try. And it involves basically clearing your mind and finding like the authentic self. Because you remember last week we were talking about the voices in people's heads, and you know, the possibility of demonic spiritual entities accessing your consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, I think it's hard for people to know where sometimes their ideas and thoughts come from. I mean, sometimes you get like you get feelings of irrational anger, don't you? Or you get something prodding your ego. You get like you get hurt feelings, and it's that thing that was called in that movie Some Gold. You know, so in the movie, the idea is some gold is the ego, and it's the ego that causes all of the pain because it's the ego that reacts. It's the ego that tells you that you're wounded, someone's hurt your feelings, you have to get revenge, and then you sort of extrapolate things sort of, you know, get out of control. But it's that thing, isn't it? It's like, how do you know that the voice in your head, that the you is really you, and it's not we're sort of swimming in a sort of sea of spirits, you know? So to what
this
extent
is the thing.
The voice in your head is the true you? And it's like when you do Zen meditation, you get free from that. You could call it ego voice, right? But you get free from that fake you, and you find the authentic you, the naked soul, which is like without thought, without any impressions, and it's just awareness, pure awareness. And I was gonna say, when you do Zen meditation, you start to spin. You get this feeling of moving through the inner world, and it's like you literally feel like you're rotating faster and faster, upside down, spinning. And it's all people who have done out of body experiences, people who have written about trying to find ways for people to do out of body. They say that this feeling of spinning this feeling of movement inside is part is like a precursor, is like a sign that you're ready to reach the out of body, that your soul or spirit is coming sort of loose of your body. Do you know what I mean?
It makes sense because everything is like essentially spiraling for what we've observed, isn't it? There's always a spin or a tumble or something like this. I mean,
Yeah.
going back to what you were saying just a second ago, it just reminded me of Eckhart Tolle. I don't know how to pronounce his name actually. Eckhart Tolle, I think it is. You know the guy, I think. You know the author?
I heard of him. Yeah, The Power of Now, right?
Yeah, that one. Practicing the Power of Now. That's it. That's a good book. I really recommend that to anyone listening who's interested in that kind of thing. So, what the kind of thing he talks about basically is how you are the observer. You're not. This is something that before I even knew who he was, I was thinking about in the context of my work, dealing with psychiatric issues with patients and stuff in my like historic work. I always thought to myself, look, if a lot of people get too worried about their thoughts because they attach themselves to their thoughts, and one of the sort of psychological, and it's sort of one of the psychological traps people get into because there's not so much knowledge about like what you're talking about. What are thoughts? Are they you, or are they actually some sort of you tapping into some extra dimensional thing? And so my advice to people would be to not worry so much about their specific thoughts and sort of not to attribute your own sort of like blame for them, really, basically, because your brain is a mass of whirring neurons and electromagnetism, and you're not necessarily in control of all the things that are popping out of it. Now that doesn't mean that you can just go and say and do whatever you want. Obviously you've got to exert you have some semblance of personal agency. You don't just go around doing whatever you want, but at the same time you shouldn't be overly worrying about if you think of something strange or you think of something that might seem weird to you or that you wouldn't tell someone that you thought about. That's not you thinking that as a sort of consciousness. And Eckhart Tolle talks about this idea of, you realize that you are this extra dimension of consciousness when you think about observing the thought. Like, you're not your thoughts because you can observe your thoughts. So you are that thing that's observing the thoughts. So then once that's the kind of like deal breaker when you start to realize, so I am something separate from my brain activity because I'm able to observe it. What is that thing that is observing? Because it's not the thoughts, it's not the brain necessarily. It might not be the brain. It could be that you're like the radio analogy of like a radio. The thoughts, the sounds aren't coming from the radio as such. The radio is just the antenna, and that's essentially what I think the brain is doing, but an antenna for a greater, vast, infinite sea of consciousness.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I didn't really follow Eckhart Tolle so much, but he's kind of like one of those names that came up. Remember last time we were talking about remote viewing? Which we were sort of trying to. I got a recommendation on the YouTube video about a guy called Inigo Swan. So it's one of the viewers actually commented last week and reminded me of a guy called Inigo Swan. And I'd forgotten all about him, actually. He was one of the pioneers of remote viewing. And he was closely connected to people like Uri Geller and the CIA. So there was a lot of sort of secret intelligence operations, CIA money involved in it.
Well, he was involved in the Stargate project, wasn't he?
What's that?
He was he was involved in the Stargate
project. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, that's what I'm just sort of saying.
Oh yeah.
Just sort of investigating, I think, like psychic phenomena and like AI type stuff. Really, like that was back in the late 70s as well, I think.
Yeah, that's right. That was in the 70s, and it's all kind of this. It's all this millennial mission. It was going to accumulate the star. There's a book called The Stargate Conspiracy, which is a really good book. I've got it in my hand. It's Lynn Picknett and Clive Prince, and they're open-minded sort of researchers, but they have a sort of healthy cynicism, especially when it's anything to do with secret societies, the CIA. They were, you know, when these organizations sort of infringe and get into the New Age movement and the kind of the human potential movement, that kind of thing.
It's quite interesting. I just looking on Google as well. I didn't realize that their partners back in those days. I mean, I'm not sure what the date is on this actually, so I will just sort of throw that out as a caveat. But it's saying that one of the partners of this Stargate project was OpenAI, and of course, OpenAI is at the moment one of the leaders in AI. I think that's the Sam Altman one, isn't it? The one that goes through. That's the sort of chat. Is that the Chat GPT one? I need to. OpenAI. It is Chat GPT, isn't it? That's run by OpenAI. Which is so ChatGPT, obviously, yeah, it is, of course it is. So yeah, my bad being a bit thick on a Sunday, but yeah, so yeah, I mean, interesting how the number one AI company globally right now was working with the CIA 40 odd years ago, 47 odd years ago on AI type stuff back then. That's kind of crazy that they were doing stuff around it. I'm not sure exactly what they were doing, but they were doing stuff around it in the late 70s. I wonder what they were doing.
Yeah, they were all they were well, the cover of it was sort of psychic operations, and well, there's probably a lot of this. It's like tech and the occult has sort of been entwined since the like 1950s with like people like Jack Parsons, the rocket engineer who was also involved, who lost his security clearance because he was involved in the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO, which is like a sort of high-level occult, above Masonic level secret society that does sex rituals and things like that and summons demons. But there's always been this sort of cross-pollination between the occult and technological research. And that's since the alchemists, in fact, you know, where the alchemists were sort of proto-chemists, but also they were occultist as well. So for them, there was no sort of separation between science and the spiritual world. They were sort of, well, that goes back to the ancient Egyptians, because the ancient Egyptians, the scientists in that culture were also the priests. So, for instance, the priests of Sekhmet
which makes more sense.
Actually,
really.
what we call physicians. They were priests of Sekhmet. They had the power to heal, and they had the awareness of different chemicals that they would use. So, for instance, Sekhmet was the lion goddess, and her statue was coated in anthrax, in order that anyone who was to touch the statue, importune her, would be struck down by this fatal disease, and it would be like the curse of Sekhmet. So the priesthood of ancient Egypt were scientists who had this awareness of different properties of materials, which they could use in their religious rites and to bamboozle and to control the public.
What was that? So you just reminded me of something, actually. I did think this week I was going to mention to you when we jumped on live. Like we were talking last week about the potential origin for what these voices in the head could be. We obviously delved quite deeply into the sort of potential demonic influence. If that is true, what do you think those things actually are? Because I got like thinking about this the other evening. I was thinking, so if these demons are the ones that are somehow managing to connect and have a bit of control and power over us in these scenarios, what are they? Are these conscious demons? Have they got a consciousness? Are they previous beings that have, I don't know, reincarnated as demons, previous living entities? Like, do they have a consciousness? Like, what that's where my brain sort of went with it this week. So I was thinking, what are they then? Like, what do you think they are, Truthspoon?
Well, there's a combination of things that they're there's all sorts of non-physical life that exists in the astral world. So there are things like there's obviously the spirits of deceased humans, but there's also the spirits of non-deceased humans, because there are people like the Freemasons and secret societies. They can, at high level initiations, once they're sort of demonically sort of connected, they can project their consciousness, and they can like be disembodied consciousness as if they're dead but they're still alive. So this is what they'll do in rituals and things like that, and they can harass people psychically like this. But the idea is that the origin of demons, so-called, is supposedly the biblical idea. And the thing is, we don't really have, we're relying on on the Bible in that sense, because in the absence of any other answers, it's like, where'd you go? So it's like, the idea is that it's the Watchers, it was the Nephilim, the spirits of the Nephilim, who when they came to Earth and when they died, they, according to the Bible, they became the demonic spirits, and their job is to lead other people astray to fill the abyss with human souls. But there's all sorts of like there are times when I've done astral projection, and I've done meditation, Zen meditation, and I've visited the astral world, and there's all sorts. It's like it's like looking through a microscope. You see all this kind of almost like astral bacteria, like these life forms that kind of look like cellular organisms and amoebas and things with tentacles like jellyfish, like all existing in the astral world, you know. And I've got like a little pet theory that that viruses, you know, the thing about viruses is that they're sort of technically like not hardly even a life form, but they have this tenacious ability to replicate themselves. Like I believe viruses are sort of physically, they're sort of broken strand of DNA or something, but they're imbued, and they're at the very limit of what we can consider life. But I think a virus is actually a physical manifestation of an astral entity trying to wreak havoc, trying to exist in the physical world, because what these demons and entities want most is to have physical expression.
So that's kind of like to my point.
They want to, yeah.
That, sorry to like cut in there, but like it was just, so that sort of is sort of like to my point of like, what are they in terms of like, if some of them anyway are wanting to have physical form, then that, sure, obviously that implies that they're non-physical, higher dimensional, and like, how did they get there in the first place, I suppose, is what I'm kind of I'm sort of trying to backtrack as such, and sort of think, well, how did they come into being in the first place? And obviously you mentioned about like, it sounds like the sort of higher hierarchy of Masons, or the people who are even above that, can do some sort of like manifestation, it sounds like. But I just wonder, like, where do they actually come from, or where do they actually exist as such? And it makes, just like as well, what I was going to say is, it makes kind of sense what you're saying about the viruses, in the sense that if you're something that's not of this dimension, you are trying to get into this dimension, it's not necessarily that you're going to suddenly just emerge in a massive form. It makes sense that you could potentially make a little bit of an input on a very small level, i.e. virus, bacteria type level. So that it does kind of have some logic to it, for sure, I would say.
Yeah. So about the voices in the head, that kind of thing. So these things are trying to, you know, express and manipulate and control human beings. And it seems to be like there's like a hierarchy in the invisible world, where the more control they can have over people, the more influence they can have over this world, then the more power they sort of have. So these beings are sort of constantly sort of trying to they steer the world, basically. It's like, whether it's just whether it's Masonic, you know, high level Masonic rituals where they're invoking these spirits, or they're creating rituals, and they're sort of using these agents to create their reality, which is what they try and do, which is kind of the opposite to what prayer is. Prayer is a sort of is a way of invoking God, but these guys, they invoke demons.
So do you think
And
there's like an opposite of that as well?
well, yeah, well, if you're invoking God, you use prayer to invoke God. But the point is, we can't quite be sure of how much of our consciousness is truly our true self, and how much of it is, whether we have like a sort of we're in the thrall of other entities, like that they play on our insecurities. There are things that they know that they can push our buttons. So it's like we're constantly, and the only way to be free of that, or to see the true self, is to do Zen meditation.
So I always thought, when I was a kid, I always thought that it could be like aliens controlling us. Like aliens get like either it's kind of like they can like pick a human, or they can pick a life or whatever, and then they could just be this. By the way, just to reiterate, it was a thought I was having as a kid, not necessarily what I believe now. But yeah, I was kind of thinking, yeah, it'd be quite funny if that's what they're doing, and like our personalities are kind of curated by them in a way. I mean, I suppose it's not necessarily impossible, but yeah, it was a funny little thought I used to have when I was a kid. I never really thought of it as extra dimensional stuff, but then yeah, I was just a kid. I was a weird kid, I had like lots of books about supernatural stuff and UFOs and the X-Files, Book of the Unexplained, and all of these kind of things. So these were thoughts I would have quite a lot of.
Yeah, so that's it. So I mean, I'm a great believer in Zen meditation. I mean, I just don't get enough. I don't get a chance to do it often enough. But it's sort of somewhat similar to what you were saying before about your interest in remote viewing, and how, in remote viewing, you're sort of creating an inner world. You're trying to observe something in the outer world, but you're doing it by going to the inner world.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we've said before, and you said before in books and stuff, and for ages, about how, and it's a real game changer when you actually sort of get your head around this sort of focus on it, I suppose, the view of it. It's something that I struggled with for ages as well. And you eventually, after a bit of trying and a bit of patience, managed to kind of like elucidate for me. But just this idea that, extra dimensions aren't out there. They're from within, like technically, like down into the nexus points beyond the atom kind of thing, as opposed to, up in space sort of thing. And it took me a long time to kind of wrap my head around like what that would look like in a way. But then, like you've said before as well, I'm sort of paraphrasing slightly, but how like dimensions, the next dimension up comes from the one down, from the one before it, in the sense that, like, a 2D square is made up of 1D lines, a 3D cube is made up of 2D squares, sort of thing. So it would make sense that to access what is a more sort of infinite consciousness, you would have to sort of go down as such, quote unquote, down as such, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and also like this reference where I made to science and how it's connected to the occult, and really always has been. I mean, there's a really good book called by C.S. Lewis called That Hideous Strength. It's the final book in his space trilogy, and it's about an occult takeover of Earth, of England. And what's happening in that story is actually very similar to the state of England right now. And it's this organization called the NICE. I think it's a national. What is it called? No, I can't remember the NICE, what the acronym stands for. I'm just going to try and look that up. National Institute of Coordinated Experiments. That's what it is. Yeah, and it's basically an ostensibly scientific organization which takes over this university called Edgestowe. I think it's all based on Cambridge or Oxford, and it appears to be humanistic. So it's a humanistic, rational materialistic, dogmatic sort of organization on the surface. And it follows the story of this man whose ambition is such that he's brought into this group and he wants to get closer and higher up into it. And there's a point at which he's like offered an initiation, and it shows that C.S. Lewis must have been some kind of insider, and he must have been involved in some kind of secret society, because he's sent into something called the objectivity room, and he sees all these pictures, and they're all biblical themes, and they're like the Last Supper, and they're all painted in a sort of strange and unsettling way. Like for instance, the Last Supper, there's like beetles everywhere, and it's sort of satanic art. And he sort of, this is I think this was in the 50s he wrote this. So he's introduced into this sort of this initiation where he has to sit in this room, the so-called objectivity room, and he has to look at all these paintings of biblical themes, and he has to sort of, all the proportions are changed in the pictures, and there's all sorts of disturbing elements, and he has to sort of, it's like, what he realizes is that it's like the crooked element, they sort of warped. They wanted to make him sort of insane. They wanted to change his view of reality so that it would be sort of skewed and warped by this kind of this sort of satanic askance view. You know how modern art is, you know, sort of the kind of stuff you might see in modern art. It's kind of like that kind of, it's no longer beautiful. It's something else. It's trying to achieve something else. It's trying to achieve a kind of sense of mental disorder. And so he's in this room, and then finally he understands what they want him to do. They want him to become insane, and they want him to have, because what is this group in this book is ultimately they're called the macrobes. So a microbe obviously is a tiny organism, but a macrobe would be a huge organism which overshadows humanity, and these macrobes are in communication with human beings. I mean, we would call it, they would be known as demons. And ultimately what he's finally asked to do is to spit on the cross. And the part of the room is opened, and there's like a statue of Jesus, and I think he's told to spit on it. And he realizes at that point that Jesus represents the straight in man, the straight, not line, the straightness, and this secret society represents the crooked. And he realized that the cross is what happens when the crooked meets the straight. The crooked will always try and destroy the goodness and the straight, and it ends up as a cross. And then he realizes, well, hang on, if none of this, if they're trying to tell me that religion doesn't mean anything, and what's the point even spitting on the cross of Jesus? It's just, and at that point he refuses. He says, it's a load of nonsense, I'm not going to do it. But what this is, it's ostensibly a so-called scientific organization, but at the higher levels, they're actually run by these macrobes, these demonic entities which possess the people. And what it is, it's like there are levels of understanding, just like in the Freemasons, because, you know, I mean, Freemasonry now is ostensibly a secular organization, and they, you know, they sort of, they're the ones who are, you know, promulgating, you know, materialistic atheism throughout the media and everywhere. But at the higher levels, they're completely, they know that the spirit world is real, and they, you know, they worship Satan. And in this C.S. Lewis book, this is exactly what he shows. He shows that this organization hides behind this secular atheist portico, but at the higher levels, they are dealing with demonic forces.
It's interesting that you're saying that in terms of who C.S. Lewis was as well, in terms of that, how successful he was and how much he wrote and everything like that. When we were talking a little bit before about how are you getting your ideas, how are you getting your thoughts, are they entirely just conjured from your brain, or are you tapping into something? Especially when those thoughts are what you just described about the macrobes, about something that could be classed as a sort of demonic or otherworldly supernatural type influence over people. Where are those ideas coming from? Is C.S. Lewis just conjuring those himself from the depths of his own mind personally, or is there some kind of influence going on there? Especially with the people who are that creative. Do you know what I mean? Also, you reminded me of something I was going to ask you about that I thought about earlier in the week. You were talking before about like the Nephilim, like, and the larger beings as such. What do you think about that? Because I think that sort of thing is perfectly possible. It's like not. The question is more, have they ever visited Earth? But I mean, I would suspect that surely out there in our galaxy, in the universe, in all the galaxies, there are other Earths that are a little bit smaller, other Earths that are a little bit bigger, stars that are roughly the same or a little bit bigger, solar systems that are maybe like our solar system, just XXL versions. And so it seems to, it seems to follow that inevitably there would be other like humans that will be just like relative to the size of those solar systems and Earth. If you've got an Earth that's like, if you've got a solar system like ours, which is basically ours, but like 10 times as big, all the planets are 10 times as big, the star is 10 times as big, then wouldn't it follow? I mean, it surely follows that there would be similar creatures on those planets or Earth-like planets that could harbor life, but they would just be 10 times bigger as well. So it doesn't seem unlikely that you could have Nephilim type characters, that you could have, especially if they were potentially what is always said that they're kind of like aliens that visited, isn't it? Or at least some of that's the theory of some of it anyway. But yeah, I think it's perfectly possible, man.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So of course, like on those planets and those star systems, yeah, you'd like to be 10 times bigger, but the whole structure of life would potentially be different. And who even knows whether, I mean, there was always that thing that the idea that since we're in such a limited visible spectrum of the EM wave of light, that there could be other life forms that exist on other vibrational scales that we can't perceive. So it could be that, I mean, it could be that the other planets in our solar system do have life on them, but it exists in a way that we cannot measure or perceive. It exists on a different vibrational level, or it exists astrally. It's like a sort of spirit life.
So I was just going to say, what's going to be fun as well is at some point, surely they will start finding fossils on Mars, because I'm convinced, I always have been since I was a little kid, and I'm sure, I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago on here, about how since I was a little kid, I always kind of thought that Mars used to have life on it. I do think that that's the case, and I therefore think it follows that we'll find some form of fossilized evidence of that, and that's going to be interesting when that happens.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I haven't really thought about that particularly, but I mean, it's unknown, isn't it? It's like we can't be sure that Mars that it had life, but I mean, what do you think the chances are? I mean, are you certain that there was life on Mars?
I don't know. It seems to make a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know like the absolute full, like no one knows the absolute full history, obviously, of what happened with the planet. I know we've got a pretty detailed, I know we can track back pretty well, but there's a lot of things that we're not aware of, or at least not told about, perhaps anyway. But it just seems like it was a planet to me, observing just the landscape. Essentially, it seems to me like a planet that kind of like died as such. There was some event that wiped life off it in some way. Listen, may not be the case, but it would not be a surprise. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that happened in the solar system and on Earth as well that we're totally unaware of. I think we're still very, very young and embryonic in our understanding of history. for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think like it could have, you know, I think there was a point where I would need to check this actually, but I think there was a point where the what's it called? The orbit was a bit closer to the sun for a bit, so it could have had more Earth-like qualities about it many moons ago.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's something that we can't really prove one way or another. But yeah, I mean, we mentioned there was like a lot of hoaxes back in the day, though the pyramids of Mars and the face on Mars, and
Oh
there
yeah, no, I know.
there were people trying to make out that the Giza plateau and the pyramids was also on Mars, that there were giant pyramids on Mars and stuff, and it was quite, you know, it was quite an interesting theory, and it's quite, you know, those kind of things are quite appealing, aren't they? I mean, the whole thing about 2012 and the ascension and all that was hugely appealing to people in the, you know, the turn of the millennium, who wanted more, who wanted some kind of hope of transcendence. And like, even if it meant the end of the world, do you remember all that crap about people said, oh, in 2012 we'll be able to fly, we'll have the photonic belt, will you know, the galactic precession of the equinox or something, and it meant we'll finally enter the photon belt and we'll be all illuminated. Do you remember all that crap? That 2012,
yeah, there was a lot of those stories floating
Mayan
around.
calendar, all that crap.
Well, this is it. Yeah, even my mother, bless her, she was saying about, she used to say to me, the Mayan, how did she use the phrase? She said, the Mayans said the world as we know it will cease to exist on that date. I think it was something like
that. They didn't say that. They didn't. No, they said nothing of the sort. It's just, all it is. It's the end of their calendar. That's all it was, wasn't it?
Basically, yeah. That was the funny thing. It was just the end of.
And it's just because it run out of numbers, because it's like a 12-digit system. It's a 12 base number system. So it just ran out of numbers, went on to 13, and there is no 13 in that system. So that's all it was. It's just the long count calendar. You remember all that stuff? God, there was a lot of bullshit on the internet. And I was always trying to get trying to reason with people. You know, what's the evidence that anything's going to happen on 2012? Just get ready, because nothing's going to happen. And how can you deal with that? Can you deal with the idea that nothing will happen? Because if people have got into a delusion or wishful fantasy, the hardest thing is for them to step back and consider that maybe that won't happen. It's like that cult kind of attitude, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
the flat Earth thing, man. That's a big one now. The flat Earth, man.
Right, so with that, my question with that, like, you're a guy who understands physics like way better than me, but like, I don't see people making this point. So maybe it's a stupid or irrelevant point. But what I've always thought about flat Earth is, like, if it was flat, then surely it would spin differently. Like, it would spin differently than a sphere. It would.
Oh well, there's no point in trying to reason with these people, because there's no ability to reason. You're making, you actually, because what they have to do is, if they believe in flat Earth, then they have to replace all of the laws of gravity and Newton and relativity and physics as we understand it, and they don't have anything to replace it with. So there's like, that's just the biggest argument. They have no replacement cosmology or any kind of material understanding of forces. It's nonsense. But you can't reason with them, because once you start trying to reason and bring these things up, as all sort of cultists, they sort of have recourse to sort of ad hominems and those kind of things, and they'll just sort of. Have you ever spoken to any flat earthers? You actually communicate with them?
I mean, well, I don't know anybody. None of my sort of network are believing in those sort of things, or that specifically. Even I've just talked to people, or like briefly chatted or messaged people on like Facebook or social media, whatever, on X. So I think, in fact, not even on X. It's been a long time since I've actually interacted with one.
We used to get them on the David Icke forum all the time, and you know, you would try, and if you tried to just reason with them, they'd sort of call you like a NASA apologist or something, and then they would say, "Oh yeah, well, I suppose you believe the moon landings are real as well," and then they would divert, they would like smoke screen it. then they would change the subject to something that they could be right about, and they talk about the fake moon landings. And we say, yeah, no, I actually know the fake. I know, I don't believe we went to the moon, but that doesn't mean just because NASA lied about the moon landings, it doesn't mean that they're lying about the geostationary orbits and satellites. It doesn't mean they're lying. It just means that just because NASA, deceptive about some aspects of their work in the past, such as the moon landings, doesn't mean that everything's a lie. So that's what they try and do. They try and take recourse in things that they do have evidence about, but are not related to flat Earth, but are obliquely related by saying, oh, well, NASA lied about this. So they're also lying about the shape of the Earth. But
Again,
as to flat Earth, you should get a flat earther on. As to defending flat Earth, it's indefensible,
We need to get rich and then send them all into space on like one of the little low orbit missions. Like someone's going to do that eventually, and it's going to be hilarious. If I was a billionaire, I would just get like 5 or 6 of the most prominent. I don't know who they would be, but like flat Earth, the most prominent flat Earth people who got like the most followers on all social media, like whoever the 5 most prominent ones are, find that out.
Eric Dubay, he's quite prominent.
I've actually
got them out. Eric Dubay. He's.
Oh yes, I've heard that name. I have heard that name. But yeah, stick old Eric in and a few of his chums and send them up into space in a rocket, film it, and live stream it, and live stream their reactions as they go up and they see the fucking Earth for the first time, and they actually see that it's not a fucking disc. I just think that would be just beautiful television, beautiful programming.
I think they did. I think somebody did fund somebody to go to the Antarctic. A flat earther was sent to the Antarctic because the flat Earth belief is that the Antarctic and the northern regions are blocked with what they call an ice wall.
Yes, that was called the final experiment.
And who knows what's beyond the ice wall? But it's like that's like the frontier of the flat Earth universe is an ice wall beyond which here be dragons. We have no idea what is behind that. So hang on, I think let me just check this out. Look, there is the final experiment. It's called. It's an expedition. Yeah. It took place December the 14th to the 17th. And it's to observe the midnight sun to test modern flat Earth theories. So it was organized by Will Duffy, who's an American Christian. He invited 48 flat Earth content creators to Antarctica to witness the midnight sun. And so what you're saying, well, rather than blast off into space, they can just go to Antarctica. And obviously, the midnight sun, it contradicts it proves that the Earth would be a globe, and it contradicts the flat Earth. So, hang on, what happened? I'm just reading from here. So, after traveling from Chile to Union Glacier Camp in West Antarctica, the expedition members live streamed the midnight sun for several days. The participating flat Earthers all admitted that the midnight sun was a real phenomenon. The larger flat Earth community has rejected the results and accused the participants, including the flat Earthers, of having faked the expedition.
Of course.
And of being part of an even larger conspiracy. How insane is that?
Because when you're in that frame of mind, if that's your mindset, if that's your approach, then you can never be proved wrong, because you can just keep extrapolating up that it's a conspiracy within a conspiracy of a conspiracy.
Insanity. You're saying the whole thing was fake. They didn't really see them. That is bizarre, though. That's when... I think the point at which you no longer trust your the evidence of your senses is when you've gone insane. That is like a definition of insanity, I think. When you can no longer trust your senses, or when you no longer believe what you're seeing, that is insanity, isn't it? That's when your reality is broken down completely, right?
So with my idea, then even if we did send them up into space, into low orbit, got some absolutely perfect pictures of a oblique spheroid Earth, even then, even if it was the 5 most prominent, well-respected flat earthers on Earth at the moment, the flat Earth community would still go, nah, it's an experiment, you paid them all, they're all in on it, blah blah blah, and it's all fake, it's CGI. you just literally cannot. You'd never be able to convince them. It's brainwashing in 101, isn't it? Cult stuff.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. So yeah, Duffy invited 24 flat earthers and 24 globe earthers. It's quite interesting. Gosh, it must have cost a heck of a lot of money. The guy is a Christian pastor from Agape
35 grand per person.
Colorado. Huh?
It cost 35 grand per person. So,
oh my god!
So there was like 50
Incredible.
of them, wasn't there? So that's like
48.
That's like like nearly 2 million quid for that. And then that's just for the people. I don't know what else the cost was.
He's a former investment broker, apparently, turned Christian pastor. So gosh, 35,000 per person. Yeah, some members crowdfunded their own trip. Okay, that's very interesting. He paid the costs of 4 of the participants. Very interesting. So yeah, Duffy paid 4 of the participants. Right. No flat earth, but that's very interesting. So, and yet they still deny the evidence of their own eyes, and then the conspiracy is that the people who'd gone there were part of a large conspiracy. That's incredible. So the wider flat earth community has denied the results. How can you deny the results, claiming the footage was filmed in a dome? Absolute madness. A madness. So they create like a Truman Show kind of artificial studio. That's incredible. It was filmed in a dome studio or on a green screen, and the participants were part of a larger conspiracy. It's extraordinary.
That's brilliant, though, the lengths that they will go to. It's fun to watch people who are in that cult state. Yeah, I get it a little bit. This is slightly off the topic of metaphysics and all that sort of thing, but I get it a little bit in the football world when I've done my football podcast before, and when I'm commenting with people on social media, which I try to keep to a minimum because it's bloody annoying. But anyway, there's certain cult elements in football in terms of people who are blindly loyal to football managers, and no matter how average they are, they insist that they should never be fired. And they give the more you press them, the more you present them with actual, rational, factual evidence, the more they just kind of like backtrack and make things up, and they try to sort of like draw themselves out of it. They can never admit that they're wrong. It's just that cult thing. They will never. You could get them into whatever corner you want, on whatever cult it was, whether it's football or flat earth, whatever it is. These people are programmed to escape whatever your argument is. They can't they're not programmed to confront your argument and think independently with a bit of integrity about them. They're actually programmed by their cult to get out of the argument. If they can't win the argument, to somehow get out of it in some way, kind of like you were alluding to before, like when they're changing the subject. So it's like, it's pointless even start. Once you realize you're talking to a person like this, you might as well just either fuck off or just change the subject, because you're not going to get anywhere with these people. Do you know what I mean? They're programmed to never reason. They're technically the most unreasonable people on the round earth we're on.
Well, I'm always a great believer in that almost Socratic method of what if I'm wrong. The Socratic thing, Socrates said, the only thing I know is I don't know everything. And I think we've mentioned that before, but I think the only thing I know is I know nothing. Well, I mean, we can't quite say that we know nothing, but what we can say is we could always say that we might be wrong. And that thing about, if I could be wrong, that's like, it takes a lot for someone to have like the rational ability to understand that they could be misled about something, and that their ego could be a compulsion. It could be compulsively forcing them. It's like, because people adopt ideas and it becomes them. It becomes part of their identity, doesn't it? And that's what we have now, isn't it? Society. We have so much trouble with identity politics.
Watch out with your.
Everyone's fighting each other over it, right?
So I was just going to say, there's a bit of background noise with your mic there. I think are you moving your mic?
No,
not now.
Okay,
but just,
yeah.
So I was just going to, nothing crazy, but I just thought I'd mention it.
No, okay. So where people adopt like a superficial part of their identity, it becomes them. And then when you attack that identity or you attack that lifestyle, you're attacking their something sacred in them. And it's like a fetish, isn't it? It's almost like fetishizing. It's like with football, isn't it? It's like the extremes that, there used to be the hooligans and stuff and the support for a football team or a manager, as you said. But listen, this is an example of an interesting flat earth guy. I've just seen this. And I think he's one of the guys who went out to Antarctica, and he says, let's just play this because I haven't watched this myself yet. Let me know if you can hear this. All right, let's see if this works.
Sometimes
can you hear that?
You are wrong in life. Yeah. And I thought that there was no 24-hour sun. In fact, I was pretty sure of it. But I respect Will Duffy. He said, you want to go? I'll take you. And brought me here, and it's a fact.
I don't know. I'm still skeptical. I still think the world is flat. I don't know. Will Duffy was your name, or whoever the guy that sent him. I think I need a second opinion. I think you need to prove it to me because I still think the world is flat.
Sometimes you are wrong in life, and I thought that there was no 24-hour sun. In fact, I was pretty sure of it. But
so it takes a lot to admit you're wrong, doesn't it? Well,
I was going to say to you, it's a lot of it is an ego thing of not wanting to be wrong or to know you are wrong. And there's certain people just can't, they can't see that. In fact, sometimes it's good to be wrong because then you learn and can grow and progress and stuff. But there's a lot of people who just can't deal with this idea that they could be wrong. And then, like you say, they build an identity about it. It gets to the point where it's very heavy, and the idea of being wrong about just one thing is like a proper cataclysm for them. But yeah, it takes a lot. It takes actual kind of it takes some cojones to actually sort of say, yeah, I was wrong about that, because no one likes doing it. But then life is full of having to do things that we don't like doing, isn't it? So there you go.
Yeah, so I think that's the thing is, though, that's the thing that's causing all the trouble. And it's we have this identitarian politics because everybody is protecting, no one is willing to admit that they could be wrong because it's like their whole identity is wrapped up in that thing.
I think this is why long-form conversations are good, though, and that's why I think they've become a bit more popular over the last sort of decade or so, because in those kind of conversations, there's more scope for delving into more detail and sort of looking into why you might have thought one way about something, how there could be new information. If you're just sort of dealing with sort of 10-minute whatever little things, there's not time to kind of untangle things. Whereas if you're having 3-hour conversations with people, like a lot of podcasts are, I think people sort of gradually, people can more easily kind of thrash out ideas. Whereas nowadays there's a lot of, what I find is there's a lot of putting your fingers in your ears. You have an opinion, and then if someone tries to talk to you about it, people are essentially just they put their fingers in their ears and go, no, I don't want to listen. They're not even willing. They don't even try. No, people aren't willing to listen because they're so bedded in to their cult, whichever side they've chosen.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we'll wrap it up there because I'm still suffering from last night, so I've not been quite on the ball today. So
you've done good, man. You've done good. We've done an hour. That hour has flown by as well, by the way.
We got through an hour. Yeah. Okay. But next week I will be in a much more compass mentis, less hungover frame of mind. It's been a bit shabby today, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, we've had a little chat though, right?
No, I thought it was a good one. I mean, geez, it's I can't believe it's 59 minutes, just gone one hour now. I swear I looked at that. The last time I looked at that little thing in the top left, it was 26 minutes.
Oh, so that's cool. That's good.
So yeah, it's been an interesting one.
Any random events of the week though? Is anything what's been going on this week?
Do you know what?
The helicopter falling out the sky, that tragic sort of.
Oh, yeah, that was horrible. Wasn't
family,
it?
Seaman CAO, right?
And from
Spain, I think, right?
just rumors, and then also you get this is the thing, the age we're in at the moment, where we've got, not only do we get like a video of that almost, you know, straight away. You know, back in the day, you wouldn't, no one, you know, you wouldn't see that. You would learn about the crash on the news, but you wouldn't actually see the crash. Do you know what I mean? Like the literal point.
Yeah, it's kind of
dying.
it's becoming more and more like Spanish or Filipino newspapers. Like in those countries, they have like explicit, gory front page pictures of car accidents and crime, and I think Philippines is crazy for that. There's no sort of sense of squeamishness or, you know, sort of violent acts are depicted, but it's almost like watching. I mean, not suggesting watching a snuff movie or that kind of thing, of course, but in a sense, you are seeing someone dying in real time. It's awful, really, isn't it? You know, it's kind of
that's
that
exactly what I'm saying.
sensitivity that we've sort of lost, right, to these things.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You know, so I don't know if that's necessarily a good or bad thing, really. I suppose. I mean, otherwise, for what I will say is slightly different sort of angle, all kind of in keeping with what we talked about before sometimes, really. But do you know what I watched yesterday? I watched Ex Machina again, or Ex Machina. So I'm never sure how to pronounce
yeah,
it.
you recommended that last time, and I was thinking of watching. Is it worth watching? Yeah.
Yeah. What's great about that movie is it's one of those movies where the second time you watch it is a lot different from the first, and then in others, if you choose to watch it in a again, like third, fourth time or whatever, you still find things about it which you don't notice. Like I've seen that movie like 5 times. That was probably the 5th time or 6th time I've seen it last night. And I noticed a couple of things that I didn't notice before, and I was like, oh yeah, now that ties in. I get why that. Yeah. So it's one of them ones where you pick up on little things in subsequent viewings. But yeah, I'd really recommend it. If anyone doesn't know what it is, basically it's about a guy who's a programmer. He wins a competition. He goes to a island that's owned by a billionaire who's basically creating an AI, a full-length, sort of full-bodied AI woman, and it's essentially a Turing test of that robot. So yeah, and you know, I really recommend it. Like, even if you're not interested in sci-fi AI, it's a really well done movie. And it took me by surprise. I didn't know anything about, like, when I first saw it, I'd never really heard of it before, and someone just sort of randomly recommended it, and it went straight into my top 10 movies of all time, which is some effort. So I definitely, if you haven't seen it yet, definitely see that, because it's really decent movie.
Oh, I watched Mel Gibson Maverick. Have you seen that movie? It's one of those kind of hilarious sort of Mel Gibson. He's always got his tongue in his cheek. One of them kind of funny Mel Gibson movies that he used to do, right?
Oh yeah, I remember this one.
It's about a guy who's a card player, and he's trying to build up a stake to enter the ultimate game on a steamboat, and where he can win like $500,000, but he needs to build a stake to get into the game. And it's weird, but it's my friend recommended it because I gave him a copy of my book, Light in the Darkness, because they were one of those guys is in the book, mentioned in the book, were playing shithead, and how he would, on the blind cards, he would always get the right card. You know the game Shithead, right?
Yeah, I used to play. I can't remember it. You need to remind me, but like I did play it.
You play trump cards, like you can play a 3, and that means that the next person has to play the same suit or a 3, or you play a 7, so that person has to follow with 7 or lower. Or if you play an ace, they have to play ace. They have to play higher, or 2 or 10. So what you do is you get them to the point where that their cards, they can't. You have like 3 phases of the game. You have the 3 cards in your hand at least. Then when you get rid of all the cards in the game, you're on the cards that face up in front of you. And then once they've gone, you've got the blind cards. You've got 3 blind cards. You can't see what they are, and you just have to trust to look and play them on whatever card has been dealt to you. And this guy, this Chinese guy, he's a good friend of mine. I still see him, and we used to play these epic games of shit. And every time I could never get him. If I played an ace, he would say a prayer in Mandarin. He would start praying to Buddha, and then he would look up at the sky and he would turn the card over. If I played an ace, he had an ace. If I played a 3 of clubs, he would pray, he would turn the card down, and it'd be an 8 of clubs, or it'd be a 3 every single time. And he had such certainty that he was going to get the right card every time, and he did. And it was like, it was beyond the laws of probability, and it was like, what that is, it's basically quantum mechanics. He's like collapsing the waveform, because the card exists in a quantum state when it's blind. It can be any card. Do you know what I mean about like the quantum waveform, the quantum state?
Yeah.
You know
I mean,
when you
I was just going to say, sorry.
Works, yeah?
I was
It can
just
be
going to say
anything.
your mic again. I don't know if it's your mic again. Sorry, I could just hear that background noise as you were talking just then.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, are you holding it, or is it
we'll wrap up in a minute. Can you hear me now?
That's better now. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, do you know what I mean by the quantum flux? By the quantum
waveform and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So when you collapse the waveform, that's like you turning the card over. Do you know what I mean? You're making a measurement.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In quantum mechanics, they call it collapsing the waveform. So what is these blind cards? They exist in this quantum flux. This sort of, it can be anything. They can be any card, you know. And it's only when you turn. But you as the player and obviously as the observer, you can consciously, and well, the evidence is in what he did. He would pray, and he would consciously make the card exactly what he wanted it to be. And in the movie Maverick, this is why my mate recommended it, because it's exactly the same thing happens. He remembered. He said, "Oh, you got to watch this movie Maverick, because it's just what you're talking about." There's this scene at the end when he's got this. They're playing poker, and he's got all the cards for a royal flush. He's got like the jack missing or something, or I think he's got the 10 missing, or he's got the ace, and he's waiting for one or the other. And he has the 4 cards, and he asks for another card, and it's delivered to him face down, blind, and he doesn't even look at the card, and he goes all in, and he has this. I mean, it's just a daft movie, and it's certainly a daft fun movie, but he has such confidence that card will be the card. He'll turn it over, and it will be the ace, and it will complete his royal flush. And it's a movie, but it's a real thing, and I've seen it for real. Someone actually doing that, having confidence in a blind card and making it the card they needed to win the game. And that's what happens in Maverick. He turns it. He just goes all in on the blind card. So confident is he, and it is turned over, and it does reveal that he does get a royal flush at the end.
Some people do get crazy look though, because I used to play a lot of Texas Hold'em back in. I say look as well in quotes. I might add, when I used to play it, I was about sort of like between the age of about like 16 and I guess 18, 19. We used to play a lot of Texas Hold'em with mates from school and that. And there was a certain person would always get. Have you played Texas Hold'em before?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's the one where the cards are in. You get build
2 dealt and then 3.
You share that you have the same cards in the middle, don't you? And you have to build a hand based on those cards, right?
Yeah. So the last card's called the river card. This guy would always, like, I would say at least 80%, and that's no exaggeration. At least 80% of the time, he would hit the river card and win the hand with the river card, with the last card dealt being the one that he needed. It was just unbelievable, to the point where people were thinking of stuff like saying he shouldn't play, because he just kept taking on all our 10 and 20p's offers and stuff, 50p's offers. Because it was just like, how the hell? Because we know he's not counting the cards, he's not touching the deck, he's not doing anything. Like, I mean, and we know that the guy who's dealing, because we always change who dealt it. Obviously, you would just change each time who dealt it. And it was different people who were dealing each time. So it wasn't like he was working, obviously, with one person who was like fiddling the deck. And so it's like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? So I don't know what it is. Maybe he's got the ability too, he's got the channeling ability. I don't know. But as far as I know, he never got
confidence, that sort of sportsman's confidence, It's like there are things like archery, where you can't realistically, you can't even see the bullseye. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's amazing.
How the hell do you actually, and it's not just a case of, obviously practice is a lot of it, but there's more to it than it being just a mechanical action. You know, there's no way.
It's meditative as well as mechanical.
Yeah, meditative. Yeah, and well, it's that zone, isn't it? It's entering the zone, they call it, and it is a meditative zone, isn't it?
They describe it like that as well. If you see interviews with archers, like prominent archers, successful Olympians, and stuff like this, they will talk about the calmness, the meditative state that they get into, the sort of hyper relaxation they go into whilst they're holding some huge bow, which isn't light, by the way, and then like firing it, God knows how far away. Into the fucking, like you say, into a bullseye that you can't actually see. so it's one of the craziest things, really.
Yeah, there was I was close to the president of the Archery Federation in France, so I followed a lot of the archery over there, and there was a well-known, very famous archer, French archer called Sebastien Flute, and he was like unstoppable. He was like the number one French archer. But then he had he started having relationship problems with his girlfriend. And then as soon as that happened, his whole game fell apart because he could no longer achieve that kind of inner peace, that meditative state. Yeah. And because of the relationship issues, his game collapsed. Because he could no longer create that ideal inner world where he could hit the bullseye, accessing whatever transcendental abilities. And I believe it. I believe they are. I believe even snooker and stuff, it's kind of like, it's sort of not just a mechanical action. It's also confidence. It's meditative. It's making things happen. And because you could mathematically calculate, how hard you should hit the ball, or where you should glance the angle to get, or in archery, you have to how tight you should draw back, where you should, but you can't, your brain doesn't make that calculation. You do a sort of shortcut. You just sort of you actually just sort of,
it's sort of a guess.
You just
in a way.
Feel it. Do you know what I mean? You just feel it.
But just like I was always best at pool when I was slightly stoned, and so I was in a kind of like almost in a sort of Zenish type state anyway. But the thing is, it's funny you mentioned about the guy who had relationship problems, because we're actually seeing something similar to a degree in football at the moment.
Oh yeah.
So the Pep Guardiola, one of the most successful managers of all time, manager of Man City winning titles every year, cups every year, trebles. This season he split with his wife just at the sort of start of the season, and Man City have had their worst season for, I don't know, probably 15 years, maybe. No, maybe is that too long? No, that's probably about 12 years, something like that. But they've had, point being, they've just fallen off a cliff this season.
Yeah,
he's unable to do anything. There was one interview with him where he's been scratching himself and stuff like this. He's got because he's got a bald head, so he's got. Let me see if I can find the photo.
Interesting.
So and then everyone jokes that it was his wife who was doing the tactics, right? Do you know what I mean? But he's probably more it makes more sense. It's what you're saying, that like his inner peace now, or his just peace generally is different. Like his life is different now. He must have, obviously it's affected your wife leading, because apparently what it was he promised her the last season was going to be his last season, and he wouldn't sign a contract extension, and he would leave football for at least a year or so, have some time off, because he'd been working constantly with Man City for about, I don't know, 12 years, something like this. And then he didn't, so she ended up leaving him because he broke his promise to her that he was going to quit. So it's crazy, man.
I found this. Is this clickbait? Is this fake? Can you see the picture?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to find. Yeah, that's right.
Let me play this video. Apparently they're saying like his face he scratched his face.
Yeah. It's real. It's definitely real.
Is it real?
It's definitely real. Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
There was a big thing about it.
Yeah.
Guardiola scratched his face with his nails out of frustration. The manager of Manchester City, unable to stop the team's poor form, lost control after their 3-0 lead against Feyenoord slipped away, ending in a 3-3 draw. After the match, when a reporter asked about the wounds on his face, Guardiola replied, "What happened? I scratched myself with my nails. I just want to hurt myself now." Guardiola scratched his face.
I think that forehead stuff, is that real or?
Yeah.
Did you
It was all
mention
real.
that? Yeah. He was scratching his
100%
head.
real. I
and
remember.
stuff?
I watched the interview like the same night, and it was before it became a big thing. Because it became quite a big thing in football for a couple of weeks. Like everything is always about a week old, and then it's gone. But yeah, for a couple of weeks, it was a big thing. Like is he all right? Like what's is he like, does he need some psychiatric help or something? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it was definitely a real thing.
Pretty interesting. Yeah. So
but it makes sense from what you're saying. It makes total sense because his world's been turned upside down by his wife leaving. I mean, to be fair,
he's left him. Gosh, wow.
It's his own. It's kind of his own fault because he went against his word, sort of thing. So you can't blame her.
Damn.
So she's got to take accountability. So yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, you wanted to wrap up. Sorry, I need to go eat. I'm starving.
Yeah, man. Okay, so we did all right. We pulled it through in the end. A little bit of chat about the week and stuff. Yeah, but yeah. Okay, so next week we'll see you guys next week, and I'll be a bit sharper next week, I think.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone who's been listening. I see there's a few people listening on X and stuff as well. As I think we've got our most listener numbers live as well today for a show, so that's good.
We got 2,000 views on X last week. I don't know quite how that happened, but anyway.
Nice.
Yeah.
Onwards and upwards. All right,
anyway,
then.
Well, what about, are we going to have a special guest next week, potentially? We were going to have one this week, but it didn't happen. But what do you think it could happen?
Yeah, I hope so. Coming on to talk about time stuff in particular. She has a few questions about time. I think
it would be cooler next week because this week I was in a state, so I've not been at my best today. So I think we'll all be
no worries.
a lot better next week, man. Yeah, a bit more organized and stuff. Okay, yeah.
Just beer next week, not overproof rum.
Oh yeah, man. I'll avoid the rum. It was the ginger ale got me though. That's like, you think it's healthy, so you drink more of it, and you got lime juice in there. You think, yeah, I'm getting my 5 a day, but you bloody almost rum. Flipping out, a bottle and a half we got through, mate. Anyway, listen, have a great week, Future Shock, and everyone out there, and God bless you all. Yeah?
Everyone. I'll see you.
Let's keep tumbling through space. Let's keep on tumbling, right? Keep tumbling. Yeah.
In a bit.
See you guys. Bye.